They said it was just for a while, that the upstairs bedrooms were too full. So they put me in the cold, musty basement, like an afterthought, like furniture. But they forgot who they were dealing with. I didn't just get up from that basement. I bought every single house above it. People think the hardest part of getting old is the aching joints or the fading memory. It's not. The hardest part is watching people forget who you were, who you still are. I wasn't always someone they brushed aside. Once upon a time, I ran a business. I kept a house spotless while raising 3 kids and working nights at a diner. I balanced checkbooks, solved crises, kissed scraped knees, and buried a husband I loved more than life itself. But to them, my son, my daughter-in-law, and their precious little family, I became the old woman they had to manage. It started small. Comments. "Mom, why don't you just relax? Don't worry about the bills. We've got it now. Let the younger folks handle things." At first, I let it slide. I figured they meant well. I didn't want to be a burden. When my lease ended and I couldn't afford the new rent on my own, I accepted their offer to move in. "We want you here," my son Daniel had said. "You shouldn't have to live alone." I should have asked more questions. When I arrived with 2 suitcases and a heart full of cautious hope, they smiled politely, barely paused their television. I looked around and noticed no guest room was made up. No welcome basket. No place set at the table. Instead, they led me down a narrow staircase into the unfinished basement. "We're still renovating upstairs," Amanda said. "But this'll be cozy for now." Cozy? It smelled like damp concrete and mold. There was a single cot, no windows, and a flickering bulb dangling from the ceiling like a sad little apology. They hadn't even cleared out the boxes. Holiday decorations towered in the corner. Old exercise equipment leaned against one wall. It wasn't a guest room, it was a storage room. They called it temporary. Said they'd figure something better out. But the weeks turned into months. My joints screamed from the cold. My sinuses acted up from the dust. I bought my own little heater just to make it through the nights. They never once offered to move me upstairs. Every time I tried to bring it up, Amanda would deflect. "The boys need space for their studies. We're using the guest room for Daniel's office now. It's just easier this way." I began to realize what I really was to them. Out of sight, out of mind. At dinner time, they never called me up. I'd hear them laughing through the floorboards. On holidays, I'd sit alone, waiting while they posted family photos I hadn't been invited to take. I was an extra, a prop they didn't want cluttering the main stage of their life. But I didn't say much. Not then. You learn, after years of being a mother and a wife, that silence can be your sharpest tool. You observe, you listen, you collect, and that's what I did. I noticed Amanda never paid attention to finances. She loved spending new outfits, spa trips, the latest gadgets for the boys. Daniel pretended to manage it all, but I saw the unpaid bills piling up on the kitchen counter. The tension in their voices when the kids weren't around, the way Daniel checked the stock market like it held his lifeline. They were stretched thin, living like they had more than they did, and betting everything on an investment property Daniel swore would turn things around. The house next door had just gone up for sale. Old Mr. Glazer's place. Daniel wanted it badly. I heard him whispering to Amanda at night when he thought I was asleep. "If we get it, we can build equity fast. Airbnb the basement. Flip it in 2 years." The irony wasn't lost on me. He wanted another basement. For strangers this time. Paying guests would get fresh linens and fruit baskets. Meanwhile, I was in their own house, sleeping next to a leaky pipe with a towel shoved under it. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of the cold, but because of the fire building behind my ribs. They didn't see me anymore. but I saw them, and I decided I was done waiting to be seen. The next morning, I took the city bus into town. My joints screamed the whole way, but I didn't care. I went straight to the bank where Charles and I had opened our first account. Over 50 years ago, I still had the safety deposit box key in my wallet. Inside it, a sealed folder. Charles always called it the rainy day papers. We'd squirreled away a good sum over the years. Enough for emergencies, he said. I hadn't touched it. Even after he passed, I guess a part of me didn't want to admit that he was gone, that I might ever need it without him. But it was raining now, emotionally, spiritually. It was pouring. With that folder and my own small retirement account, I made my move, quietly, deliberately. I contacted the realtor handling Mr. Glazer's estate, set up a private meeting, told no one. When he asked, "Are you sure you want to purchase this in full?" I smiled and said, "Yes, in cash." He blinked. "I'm sorry. And it's not my business. But are you planning to live here alone?" "No," I said, "not alone. I'll have peace and sunlight." I signed the papers that same afternoon. 3 days later, Daniel came home with a strange look on his face. I heard his heavy footsteps pacing the kitchen. Then the slam of the basement door. "Mom," he called out, "do you know anything about Mr. Glazer's house?" I looked up from my knitting. "Calm as tea." "I heard it sold," I said. He frowned. "Yeah, it did. Some investor snatched it right out from under us. Paid in full." I said, nodding slowly. "That must be disappointing." He squinted at me, confused. Suspicious. But I didn't offer anything else. Not yet, because that was just step one. I wasn't done. Not even close. People like my son Daniel don't learn through conversations. They learn through consequences. And I was just getting started. After I bought Mr. Glazer's house, I didn't move in right away. I wanted to let the news sink in. Let them stew. I still stayed in their basement, knitting, quiet, helpful, just as I had been. But I watched Daniel's frustration grow every day. The way he grumbled into phone calls. The way Amanda got snappier. The way their boys argued more often over things they used to share. They thought that house would save them. That renting it out would be their golden parachute. Now it was gone. And they had no idea I was the one who took it. I started making small changes to Glazer's place, not big renovations. Just enough to make it livable. Fresh paint. A new lock on the front door, installed a proper staircase to the basement. A cozy, warm, finished one. Hardwood floors, heating vents, soft lighting. I had it furnished with love. Then I stood there, in my new basement, and looked around at the warm colors, the space, the silence. It was beautiful, peaceful, mine, and I thought, let's see how far they want to go before they notice they're standing on a trapdoor. Back at Daniel's house, I started noticing more of their cracks. Their finances were bad. Amanda began working extra hours at the yoga studio. Daniel, bless his heart, was trying to day trade from the dining room table like he had the mind for. Their credit cards got declined twice when we went out for groceries. I acted surprised. "Oh no," I'd whisper gently. "Should I cover it this time, sweetheart?" They hated that. They hated needing me, which was funny, considering how little I actually had back then, or so they thought. It wasn't just Mr. Glazer's place I had my eyes on. The whole block was shifting. I knew that, because I started attending the neighborhood zoning meetings. Anonymously, of course. I dressed in a plain coat and scarf, sat in the back, quiet as a mouse. Developers were circling. The city was planning to rezone the area for mixed use, meaning those houses would double in value in a few years, maybe triple. And my dear son, he had no clue. He was still chasing shiny objects, flipping crypto coins, trying to buy into something flashy. Meanwhile, I bought land. It started with one house, Then another down the street. A small duplex on the corner. I worked with a realtor who thought I was eccentric but efficient. I paid in full. Always quiet. Always fast. I used Charles's rainy day account, my pension, and eventually proceeds from selling off a few antiques they thought were worthless. Amanda once asked if she could toss the old wooden armoire in the garage. It's dated, she said. Not really our style. That armoire. Solid cherry. Sold it for $8,000. Thank you very much. I took that money and purchased the empty lot beside their house. When the city posted new development notices, Daniel nearly blew a fuse. There's a new owner on every damn corner, he ranted at dinner one night. The whole neighborhood's being bought out. I can't compete with these cash buyers. Amanda looked up from her phone. Maybe we can partner with someone. Or rent from one of the new landlords for a while. That was my cue. I set down my fork slowly and said, "You know, I heard the new owners might be open to some temporary tenants. If you asked nicely." They both stared at me. "You?" Daniel said, blinking. "You bought another property?" I smiled, folding my napkin. "I've bought 4. So far." He laughed, like it was a joke. Until I walked upstairs, unlocked the drawer in the hallway table, and returned with the deed to Mr. Glazer's house. Dropped it on the dinner table, right between the mashed potatoes and Amanda's vegan gravy. Silent. Then Daniel's face dropped like a lead weight. "You bought that house?" "Sure did," I said, sipping my water. "With money your father and I saved. You remember Charles, don't you? The man you buried with a smile and forgot about a week later." Amanda's eyes narrowed. "Wait, what are you trying to say?" "I'm saying," I replied, setting my glass down, "that you've been letting me sleep in your moldy basement while I quietly purchased the entire block around you, and I'm not done." Daniel pushed back from the table, suddenly pale. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." He started to speak, then stopped. Amanda's jaw was clenched so tight I thought her teeth might crack. "I've been watching," I continued. "Not just your poor hospitality, but your debt, your scheme, your precious investments. I've seen every dollar you've lost, and every lie you've told me about how temporary my stay was. And while you were playing landlord in your head, I became your actual landlord." Daniel opened his mouth again, but I wasn't finished. "I own the duplex across the street. You know, the one with the renters you keep complaining about? Lovely couple. Pays early every month. I also bought the empty lot you were trying to get a permit for. And I signed the papers today on the blue house 2 doors down," Amanda whispered. "Oh my God." I leaned back in my chair. "I bought the block above your head, and now I'm deciding what to do with it." Daniel's eyes were red now. He stood up, walked around the table like he could pace the panic out of himself. You can't just. You wouldn't actually kick us out." "Oh, I won't have to," I said softly. "The taxes are going up, the permits you need. I already have them. The contractor you were hoping to use, he works for me now." Amanda snapped. "You're doing this just to hurt us." I raised an eyebrow. "No, I'm doing this because you treated me like a burden. You put me in a basement, you served me cold meals if any, and expected me to be grateful for scraps. You thought I was finished, but I was only just beginning. Then I stood, slow and strong. You wanted a basement for profit? Congratulations, you're standing on a gold mine, but the deed doesn't have your name on it." I left the room before anyone could speak, took my plate, walked downstairs, and started packing. Not because I was being kicked out, but because I was leaving on my terms. My new home, fully furnished, sunlit, warm and upstairs. And I wasn't going to be alone there either. I didn't move out in the dead of night. No. I wanted them to watch me walk away, upright, calm, with my suitcase rolling behind me, and my head held high. Amanda stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, her face stiff like she was trying not to cry. Daniel didn't even come out to say goodbye, probably still sulking upstairs, trying to calculate what went wrong, how his own mother turned out to be smarter than him. But I didn't say goodbye. I didn't owe them that. I left the key on the kitchen counter, took my wool coat from the hook by the back door, and walked across the lawn to my new home, my house, the one with fresh lavender paint on the porch steps, and an upstairs bedroom bathed in morning light. It had hardwood floors, a working fireplace, and not a single box of dusty Christmas junk in sight. I hung the photo of Charles and me over the mantel. I made tea on my own stove, and when I sat on my floral love seat, looking out the bay window, it hit me. I wasn't in anyone's home anymore. I owned it, and that was just the beginning. See, I didn't just want a house. I wanted something bigger, something that would make it impossible for Daniel and Amanda to ever pretend they were above me again. Revenge, when done right, doesn't come with yelling or broken plates. It comes with paperwork, zoning laws, escrow accounts. I poured over everything. I had binders now, color-coded, and a real estate lawyer who started calling me ma'am with a whole lot more respect than he did on day one. I bought 2 more homes by the end of the month. Then I renovated them, fast, quietly. I hired local crews, paid well, and told them to keep things discreet. No yard signs, no contractor banners, just get it done. And they did. Those boys worked with military precision, ripped up moldy carpets, installed new windows, upgraded wiring. I walked through each home every week, clipboard in hand like a foreman. They didn't know the woman in orthopedic shoes was the one signing their checks, but I made sure every penny was well spent. Once the houses were ready, I placed ads, not on Craigslist, not on social media. I went straight to an agency that helped women, especially older women, escaping bad situations. They were tired, abandoned, forgotten by families that said, "You're too much," or "You're too old," or worse, "You're not our responsibility." I knew how that felt, so I offered them more than a room. I offered them dignity. Rent was discounted. The homes were beautiful. Each woman had her own space, her own mailbox, her own front door key. And the best part? All of them lived right next door to Daniel and Amanda. The block that once whispered with Amanda's yoga playlist and Daniel's lawnmower complaints now echoed with the laughter of women who had survived worse than a cold basement. Margaret, 60, she planted tulips along the sidewalk, bright red and yellow ones that made cars slow down to stare. Jeanette, 71, had been a math teacher. She started offering tutoring to local kids for free. Parents dropped off cookies in exchange. Rosa, 65, baked fresh empanadas and waved at everyone who walked by. She called me Jefa, which means boss in Spanish, and I didn't mind that one bit. Amanda called it a cult. I called it a community. Daniel started to notice. One afternoon, I caught him standing on the sidewalk, staring across the street at Rosa's house. She had a new welcome mat that said, "This house runs on strong women and strong coffee." He didn't say a word to me, but his expression said it all. He was starting to understand that I wasn't just living well. I was building something better than what he ever gave me. Meanwhile, their house was starting to crack. And I don't mean metaphorically. Their mortgage was underwater. I knew this because I still had access to the old mail bin in the entryway. Amanda never changed the password for the family's shared cloud drive either. Sloppy. I didn't snoop. I observed. They were behind on the second credit card. Their electricity bill had a yellow warning slip. Their water heater broke, and instead of calling a plumber, Daniel watched a YouTube video and made it worse. The boys started complaining. "Why can't we stay at Grandma's?" the youngest asked at dinner one night, loud enough for me to hear as I watered my front lawn. Amanda snapped. Because she's not that kind of grandma anymore. Oh, I heard that. And so did the other women. Rosa and Jeanette and Margaret were all outside with me. None of us said anything. We just exchanged glances. That kind of glance women share when they've been dismissed too many times by people who should have known better. 2 weeks later, I hosted a Sunday brunch on the porch of my biggest house. I had folding chairs, strawberry jam, hand-squeezed orange juice. The sun was shining, and we were happy. And Daniel? He was mowing the lawn in silence, glancing across the street every 5 minutes, like he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. I invited the city councilwoman to that brunch. I told her about our community. She listened. She liked it. 2 months later, my proposal was approved. A small business grant to turn my corner duplex into a day center for senior women. Yoga in the mornings, hot lunches, workshops, legal aid, everything Amanda's yoga studio offered and more. Only ours was free, funded partly by my trust and partly by a few quiet donations from some very powerful women in town who liked what I was doing. Amanda caught wind of it the week the city sign was installed. The Golden Porch Community Center. She stormed across the street, ponytails swinging, fury in her eyes. You're doing this on purpose, she hissed at me, right on my lawn. Doing what, dear? You're trying to embarrass us, ruin us. I smiled. No, I'm trying to create something better. You're doing a fine job of embarrassing yourselves. She stared at me, breathing hard. Then her voice cracked. We needed your help. I softened. Just for a moment. You had it. You just didn't value it. She didn't say anything else. She turned around and walked back toward their porch, where Daniel stood watching like a coward from behind the screen door. That was the last time either of them came to speak to me. But they started to get the message, because revenge doesn't always come with flames. Sometimes it looks like a painted porch. Sometimes it sounds like laughter. Sometimes it lives right across the street, glowing with the kind of warmth they never offered me. And there's more, so much more. It didn't take long before the block had a new rhythm, and I was the one setting the tempo. Every Tuesday morning we had porch yoga. Margaret led it in a wide-brimmed straw hat and loose lavender pants, guiding a group of women through gentle stretches, while birds chirped on the telephone wires. Kids on bikes slowed down to stare. Cars honked in appreciation. Every Thursday afternoon, Rosa hosted empanada-making workshops in the kitchen of the Blue House, the one 2 doors down from Daniel and Amanda. The smell of cumin and garlic drifted through the street like an open invitation. And every Saturday, Jeanette opened a little free library she'd built from scratch. She painted it bright yellow and stocked it with novels, crosswords, cookbooks, even storybooks for children. Her handwritten sign read, "Take one, leave one, stay a while." People did stay. They lingered, talked, smiled. The neighborhood transformed into a village. Not because someone bought it, but because someone built it. And across the street, in that beige stucco house with its brown lawn and peeling shutters, Daniel and Amanda were unraveling one skipped payment at a time. I didn't lift a finger to push them over the edge. They'd done that to themselves, but I made sure everyone could see the difference between how they treated me and how I treated the world. One day, the mailman, a sweet young guy named Corey, stopped me as I was trimming roses. "Ma'am," he said, "I just gotta tell you, whatever's going on this side of the block, it's magical." I smiled. "We just like our peace," he chuckled. "Well, I'll take this side of the street over that mess any day." He nodded toward Daniel's house, where a "for sale by owner" sign had just gone up. I already knew about it. Daniel didn't list it through a realtor. He was too proud, too desperate to keep control. But I'd seen the paperwork through my lawyer and the public listings. They were overvaluing the house, hoping to dig themselves out of debt with one miracle buyer. Amanda tried staging the living room with fake plants and borrowed furniture. She took photos with her iPhone and posted them on every neighborhood board she could find. But nobody called, not once, because when people drove through our block, they saw our side first. Clean porches, blooming gardens, women smiling in rocking chairs. Then they looked across the street and saw Daniel's overgrown hedges, Amanda's sour face, and a rusty old SUV parked halfway on the sidewalk. You could feel the difference. Their house didn't just look unloved, it looked unwanted. I heard their arguments at night. Through my open windows, I caught snatches of Amanda's voice, shrill, exhausted. Words like credit score and overdraft and can't you ask your mother for help? Daniel never responded loud enough to hear, but I didn't need to. I already knew what he was thinking. He was thinking about the moment I left his basement with a suitcase and a plan, the moment he lost control. And he was right, because he hadn't just underestimated me, he'd forgotten me. Forgotten the woman who kept a family afloat when Charles lost his job. Forgotten the woman who negotiated with landlords, ran 2 jobs, and still made it to every school play. Forgotten the woman who held his head while he sobbed over his college rejection letters. He replaced me in his mind with some doddering old woman who needed a cot and a blanket in a basement. But now, he couldn't even sell the house I used to sleep under. And the irony, he would need me before this was over. I knew it. I just didn't know how soon. It happened one humid afternoon. I was sipping iced tea on my porch, the sun warming my knees, when Daniel walked up the steps like a man with a tail between his legs. He knocked once on the post. "Mom." I looked up. "Yes?" His mouth opened, closed, opened again. Finally, he muttered, "Can we talk?" I nodded toward the empty chair. "Sit." He looked smaller somehow, thinner. His cheeks had sunken a little, and the lines around his eyes were deeper. We're in a bind," he started, rubbing his hands together. "You know about the listing." "I do." No bites. "I'm not surprised." He paused, looked at the ground like it might open up and swallow his pride for him. "We need a loan." There it was. I sipped my tea and waited. He didn't elaborate, just sat there, staring straight ahead like a child waiting for punishment. "You want money?" I asked calmly. He nodded. "To save the house you put me in the basement of." His jaw tightened. I said, "I'm sorry." "You never said it." He blinked. "What?" "You never said the words. You never apologized." He looked at me, eyes flickering. "I didn't think you wanted one. I didn't need one. But now that you're asking for help, I expect it." Silence. Then, "I'm sorry." "Say what you're sorry for." He looked at me like I'd slapped him. But I waited. After a long pause, he exhaled. "I'm sorry for putting you in the basement. For not making room. For treating you like you didn't matter." I nodded slowly. Then I stood and walked inside. He followed me, confused, pausing at the threshold. When I returned, I was holding a white envelope. He looked at it like it might explode. "What's this?" "A check." His eyes lit up. I smiled. "You'll find it's for a specific amount. Enough to help with a rental deposit. Not enough to save the house." He froze. "What?" "You're going to sell the house, at market value, and leave this neighborhood." His mouth dropped. "You want me to leave? You already made that decision, the moment you put me downstairs like I was a problem to be contained." He stepped back like I'd kicked him in the stomach. "I can't believe you'd do this to your own son, and I can't believe my own son would treat me like a couch cushion. And still expect me to help him decorate the living room." We stood there for a long moment, nothing but birds chirping and distant laughter from Rosa's house. Finally, I said, "Take the check. Or don't. But you're done here." He took it. Of course he did. Pride only lasts as long as the power bill's paid. Amanda didn't come say goodbye when they left. She stared at me from their car window with pure loathing. Like I'd ruined everything. But what she didn't realize is that I hadn't taken anything from them. I just stopped giving. And the difference between those two things is what makes a woman powerful. They left on a rainy Tuesday morning. No grand goodbye. No thank you, just a U-Haul truck. 2 grumbling kids in the back seat. And Amanda with her sunglasses on. Even though there was no sun, I stood on my porch and watched them through the drizzle. I didn't wave. Neither did they. Funny how empty a house can look even before it's officially vacant. After they pulled away, I walked across the street. The for sale sign leaned crooked in the front yard, soaked through and sagging. Amanda hadn't even taken it down. I stepped onto the porch, unlocked the door. I had gotten the keys in escrow that morning, and stepped into what used to be their house. Now it was mine. The carpet was worn. The air stale. The energy heavy. I walked through slowly, room by room. The kitchen smelled like burned plastic. The upstairs office still had peeling motivational stickers on the wall. One read, "Work hard, dream big." I let out a quiet breath. Not quite a laugh. "Dream small. Live blind," I muttered. In the basement, my old prison, there were still cobwebs in the corner. The cot I'd slept on was gone. But I could still see the dent in the cement where the frame had rested. I remembered the nights I'd spent down there. Cold, sore, forgot, listening to the footsteps of my own family above me. Now the house was silent, and every room echoed with what they chose to ignore. I didn't move into the house, of course. I had no desire to live in their old shadows. But I wasn't going to let it sit. I had bigger plans. Smarter ones. The first thing I did was gut the basement. New walls, insulation, vinyl flooring, recessed lighting, a kitchenette, a washer and dryer. By the end of the month, it was a fully legal, fully furnished garden-level apartment, and I knew exactly who I wanted to move in. Her name was Evelyn, 68, quick-witted, ran a nonprofit for battered women. Until the funding dried up. She lost her house 2 years ago. When the bank reassessed her mortgage, lived out of her car for a while. When she stepped inside the place and saw the pantry already stocked and the walls painted light blue, her eyes filled with tears. This is nicer than anywhere I've ever lived," she whispered. I handed her the key. "It's yours now, rent controlled, as long as you want," she cried harder. Across the street, Margaret watched from her garden. She nodded at me, smiling. Our little village was growing. I renamed the house, took down the old numbers, and replaced them with polished bronze ones, a subtle marker. But I knew, and so did everyone else on our side of the block. The funny thing was, once Daniel and Amanda left, the other neighbors started warming up to me. People who'd once kept to themselves suddenly began waving. A few even brought baked goods or asked if they could volunteer at the community center. Turns out, Amanda hadn't just been cold to me, she'd cast a chill over the whole street. But now the block had a pulse, a real one, and I wasn't finished. I bought the last house on the row. A crumbling fixer-upper that Daniel once said wasn't worth flipping. It needed a new roof, new plumbing, and a miracle. So I gave it all 3. I turned it into a transitional home for elderly women coming out of the hospital or tough family situations. Just a place to stay while they figured out what was next. Nothing fancy, just safe, soft beds, warm soup, and someone to say, "You're not alone." I called it the attic, because sometimes what gets shoved away still has value. That house filled up within 2 weeks. There was Lorraine, 72, who'd been kicked out of her daughter's condo after her stroke. Then Harriet, 81, who'd been living in a motel after her family forgot to come get her from the rehab facility. They arrived with nothing but a duffel bag and grief in their eyes. But after a few weeks, they walked with their backs straighter. I gave them more than shelter. I gave them dignity. And word started to spread. A local newspaper came by to do a human interest piece. They took a photo of me on the porch, with Jeanette and Rosa. The headline read, "The Block That Love Built." I didn't plan that, but I liked it. The article went viral online. Donations started coming in. Not just money, but furniture, books, care packages. A group of teenage girls from the local high school started volunteering on weekends. They painted the picket fences, planted flower beds, read aloud to the older women. Even the mayor paid a visit, called me a model citizen, took a photo with me in front of the community center. I didn't care about the politics of it. I only cared that people were starting to see us, not just me, us. The women they'd all forgotten, and still, not a word from Daniel. I knew where they ended up, a small apartment in a not-so-great part of town. I heard Amanda had to sell her yoga studio, that Daniel was working part-time as a courier. Part of me wanted to feel pity, but the rest of me was proud, not for their downfall, for my rise. Because I didn't just escape their basement. I bought the whole block that stood above it, and I filled it with light, warmth, and second chances. I created something they couldn't even imagine. Because they never saw the value in what they threw away. They never saw me. But now, the whole city did. And I wasn't done yet. There's a certain kind of quiet that settles over a street once the right people move in. It's not silent, not dull. No, this quiet is alive. It's the hum of a neighborhood healing. Porch chairs creaking under conversation, wind chimes dancing in the breeze, the clink of coffee mugs in the morning light, laughter echoing from open kitchen windows. That was our block now, and my house, the one Amanda once called just for now, was at the heart of it. But peace, I've learned, is a strange kind of power, because the moment you find it, someone always tries to take it back. It started with a letter, cream-colored envelope, no return address, slid into my mailbox like it belonged there. Inside, a formal invitation to a family reconciliation dinner, signed Daniel and Amanda. I laughed, out loud, right there on the porch. They didn't want reconciliation. They wanted attention, or money, or forgiveness without the work. Still, curiosity is a stubborn thing, so I went, not because I missed them, but because I wanted to see what desperation looked like when it dressed up. The dinner was held at a mediocre steakhouse off the highway, one of those places where everything's beige and the servers look like they're counting the minutes until they can clock out. Amanda greeted me at the door in a knockoff handbag and too much perfume. Daniel stood behind her with a tight smile and a fresh haircut that couldn't hide the lines in his forehead. "Mom," he said, voice flat. "Amanda." She nodded. "Thanks for coming." They had reserved a booth near the back. I slid in slowly, letting my joints complain loud enough to be heard. No one spoke for a long moment. Finally, Amanda cleared her throat. "We just wanted to reconnect." "With what?" Daniel winced. "With you. With family. We've been through a lot, and we think it's time to heal." I raised an eyebrow. "Are you asking me to forget everything?" "No," Amanda said quickly. "Of course not. But maybe we could move forward." I sipped my water. Interesting timing. Daniel stiffened. "What's that supposed to mean?" I leaned in just a little. "You lost your house. Your business is gone. You're in debt. And suddenly, you remember your mother exists." He looked down at his menu, pretending to read the specials. Amanda fidgeted with her bracelet. "We're not asking for money," she said softly. "No," I replied. "You're asking for proximity, for association. Because your pride is bruised and you think being near my success will patch it up." Daniel exhaled. "Mom, this isn't a battle." "No, honey. That was 3 years ago. You just didn't realize I won." Silence. The server arrived and took our orders, though no one really ate. They tried to make small talk. Amanda asked about the community center. Daniel mentioned he might have some ideas for expanding services. I let them talk. Let them pretend. Then, when the check came, I paid it, without asking. Daniel protested. I held up a hand. "Consider it a gift. One last one." Amanda's voice caught. "Why do you hate us?" I looked at her for a long time. "I don't," I said, "but I no longer carry the weight of people who saw me as furniture." I stood, took my coat. Daniel said, "So that's it?" I turned back to them. "No. This is the part where you learn how it feels to be forgotten. Not out of cruelty, but out of peace." And then I walked out. The next morning, I hosted a block breakfast. 6 porches participated. Waffles, fruit, homemade jams, tea. The high school girls brought flowers. Evelyn played records from her window, Billie Holiday and Aretha Franklin, and I told them all about the letter. Not to be petty, but to remind them of something we all forget sometimes. We don't have to accept people just because they share our blood. Family is earned, chosen, proven, and I had a real family now. Later that week, I met with my lawyer again, not because of Daniel, but because of the future. He sat across from me, glasses low on his nose. "You're sure about this?" "I'm positive." He slid the papers toward me. They were thick, but not heavy. Just pages spelling out the transfer of all my properties, not to individual, to a trust. The Porchlight Foundation, dedicated to providing housing, community, and care for elderly women cast aside by their families. Rosa would oversee the community kitchen. Jeanette would run the free tutoring program from the library. Evelyn would become the director of resident services. And me? I'd stay exactly where I was, on my porch, in my chair, sipping sweet tea. But now, it wouldn't just be my legacy. It would be ours. The homes would never be sold, never rented to profit-hungry developers, never converted into cold concrete shells. They would always belong to the women who needed them most. When I signed the papers, I felt something release in my chest, like I'd been holding my breath for years and finally exhaled. The block was no longer a revenge plan, it was a rebirth, and in the middle of it all stood a woman who once slept in a basement, wrapped in a borrowed blanket, forgotten by her own son. Now, she owned the whole block above them. I never planned to be the woman who built something that outlived her pain, but life has a funny way of shaping you, from the very cracks they tried to bury you in. Some nights now, I sit out on my porch with a book in my lap and just listen. I hear Rosa humming in her kitchen, windows wide open, Jeanette laughing from across the street, as the neighborhood kids argue over which math game she's going to make them play. Margaret, pulling weeds in her garden, muttering about how she can't trust anyone else to do it right. And me? I just smile. Because every sound is proof that I was never the problem. That being quiet, being generous, being out of the way wasn't a weakness. It was patience. Strategy. It was me gathering strength, while they assumed I had none left. After I signed the final papers for the Porchlight Foundation, something in me shifted. I slept better. My back didn't ache quite so much. Even my knees, stubborn as they were, stopped groaning when I walked up the porch steps. Maybe it was just relief. Maybe it was victory. But I think, It was freedom. One morning I woke up to find a letter slid under my door. No return name, just blocky handwriting. I didn't recognize. I opened it at the kitchen table while my tea steeped. It read, "I didn't understand before, but I do now. You were always stronger than we gave you credit for. I'm sorry for how we treated you. I wish I could undo it, but I know I can't. I hope you're proud of what you've built." I am. Daniel. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it, placed it in the drawer with my favorite recipes and Charles's old letters, and left it at that. No need to write back. That chapter was closed. But the next one? Oh, it was just beginning. I started receiving letters from other women across the country. Women who had read about our block. Women who said, "I thought I was the only one." Women who were tired of being erased, discarded, forgotten. We started answering them. Me, Rosa, Jeanette, Evelyn. We called them our porchlight pen pals. Some women just needed someone to talk to. Some wanted advice on setting up a similar community. Others asked how to survive the pain of being left behind. Our answers were never perfect, but they were honest. "You are not crazy," one of Jeanette's replies said. "They told you you were because they didn't want to look at themselves." "You are not weak," Rosa wrote. "You are tired. And there is a difference." I sent a postcard to a woman in Nebraska whose son had kicked her out for refusing to babysit his kids full-time. I wrote, "You are not an unpaid servant. You are someone who deserves joy, even now, especially now." She wrote back with a picture of her holding a head in a studio apartment filled with plants. "I bought my own place," she said, and named the cat Porchlight. We cried over that one. I started to realize revenge might have been what got me out of the basement, but love is what built the rest. And legacy. Legacy is what we leave standing when all the bitterness has burned out. One afternoon, while we were planning our spring block party, live music, a potluck, and maybe even a few dance lessons from Rosa, I saw a young woman walking up the street. She looked nervous, holding something wrapped in a brown cloth. She stopped at my gate. "Are you Mrs. Langley?" "I am," I said, rising from my chair. She stepped forward. "My name's Tessa. I'm Amanda's niece." I tensed, but she held out the wrapped object like a peace offering. "She wanted you to have this," Tessa said softly. "Said it was something you might have missed in the move." I took it, unwrapped it slowly. It was a photo frame, a cheap silver one, the kind you get at the drugstore. Inside was a photo of me, Charles, and Daniel. Daniel was no older than 10. We were sitting on a blanket at the park. I had one arm around Charles, the other holding a sandwich to Daniel's mouth while he laughed. I hadn't seen that picture in decades. Tears welled up before I could stop them. "Thank you," I whispered. Tessa smiled, then hesitated. "Can I ask, how did you do it? All of this?" I looked around the street. The porches, the flower beds, the wind chimes. "I remembered who I was," I said, and then I stopped waiting for anyone else to see it. She nodded. Slowly. "I think I needed to hear that," she said. "I've been letting my family make me small." I stepped forward and gently placed my hand on her arm. "You're not small. You're growing. Don't let anyone trim your roots." She left with a smile, a real one, and I realized maybe I was becoming the kind of woman I'd once needed too. Not just a mother, not just a grandmother, but a guidepost, a warning, a beacon, a porch light. That evening, the women on the block gathered in the center lawn. We brought blankets and folding chairs. Someone made popcorn. Someone else brought an old projector. We played a black and white movie on the side of Rosa's garage, To Kill a Mockingbird. The kids sat in a cluster, whispering and giggling. The adults watched in silence. The light flickered over our faces, soft and nostalgic. I looked around and saw Evelyn holding hands with a neighbor. Jeanette was wrapped in a quilt someone had made for her birthday. Rosa was asleep in her chair, a plate of half-eaten empanadas in her lap. And I leaned back and looked up at the stars. Peace, real peace, the kind you build yourself when the world stops offering it. They made me sleep in the basement, so I bought the whole block above them. And in the end, I didn't just take my place back. I gave everyone a place to stand.